Michael Jordan has made more money from his Jordan brand than from his entire career playing basketball. But how did Nike and Jordan turn a simple sports shoe into a fashion icon and the Jordan brand into one of the most valuable brands in the world? Were Nike and Jordan extra smart, or were maybe luck and timing a reason for it? Obviously both, but the 80s were a particularly good time to create a global sports brand. And still, the process can be replicated even today if you look at current social trends and start thinking about your brand and business more strategically than just saying,
I just need to rank #1 on Google.
Let me show you how the pros think about branding and marketing strategies. Let's go. Welcome to the brand new show where I'll show you how to create an awesome digital brand that people will love without overwhelming your marketing department with all the things you supposedly have to do. Creating an immortal brand is not easy, but there are a few things that we can learn from those that have done so to apply to our own brands and become demigods ourselves. There are a few brands that have stood the test of time, and Nike is one of their leaders. Two moments in time stood out to me as being especially formative to Nike becoming this giant sports company it is today, both of which contain lessons for all of us. The first was the start of the cooperation with Michael Jordan, which completely changed Nike's public brand perception from being a feature-driven company to a cultural icon.
K, what is that, some sort of Asian talk or something?
While becoming an icon is pretty hard, moving away from a narrative that stresses your product's feature to a customer-first approach isn't that hard at all, but has a great impact on your overall results, just like it did for Nike. Let's have a look at the status quo of the performance apparel industry today. If, for instance, we look at the value of Nike compared to its competitors and how much revenue they are making, we can clearly see that Nike is ruling the sports world. You would have to combine the revenue of the next 4 competitors globally to match the numbers of Nike, which is insane. Obviously, this wasn't always the case, so let's have a brief look into Nike's history. Nike was founded in January 1971 and by the start of the 80s was a brand mostly known for its running shoes. They weren't doing poorly, especially when considering they were competing against brands like Adidas, which was founded in 1949, or Converse, which was founded in 1908, but from a revenue point of view, they barely made the top 5 in the US, with the majority of their revenue coming from the running department.
For no particular reason, I decided to go for a little run.
Most of the employees were runners themselves, some even former elite track and field athletes, which may explain why the running category was always front of mind for the entire company. Originally, Nike was called Blue Ribbon Sports, back when it imported Tiger running shoes from Japan since 1964. The founders Philip Knight and Bill Bowerman eventually decided to create their own shoes, and thus Nike was born. If we look at these circumstances, we can see that running was the very fabric of Nike and also its biggest limiting factor for growth. In the first 20 to 25 years, everything at Blue Ribbon Sports and Nike was focused on runners. All other sports were second to running. Don't get me wrong, that makes total sense until a certain point. Expanding too early into other product categories before having mastered one category is one of the biggest mistakes you can make.
Big mistake.
By losing focus of your biggest strength, you are expending too many resources like time and money on things that may or may not work. At the same time, you are draining resources from a product that you know works and could expand even faster if you concentrated your resources. So Nike was very smart by keeping focus. Then, Nike went public in 1980 and the IPO made everyone at Nike very rich.
What are your superpowers again? I'm rich.
The thing is, when you go public and want to keep in good faith with your investors, decision making has to change for most companies. Instead of being focused on doing the best in your eyes, you now have to stand up to the scrutiny of public opinion and preferably generate more and more revenue. The easiest way to expand from your original zone of comfort is to expand into other markets, or in the case of Nike, sell more internationally and focus on other sports and apparel. In the early 80s, Nike focused on tennis, basketball, baseball, soccer, American football, and additional Olympic sports like the long jump. They already had products and even some athletes to represent Nike in each of these sports, but honestly, that wasn't enough. Let's look, for instance, at basketball. Some of the biggest stars of the 70s were Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Dr. J. Every one of them was wearing Converse.
Hey, Dr. J, where'd you get those boots? Are you wearing magic shoes?
Then there was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was wearing Adidas Superstars. And there were even some Puma athletes, and starting in 72, some athletes would wear the Nike Bruin or the high-top Nike Blazer. Despite those few exceptions, it is safe to say that the basketball court was owned by Converse and Adidas. Nike only had Me Too products that weren't extraordinary, like the shoes they developed for runners. That changed in 1982. Nike released the Air Force One in 82, their first shoe engineered for basketball players. To quote from Nike's 83 annual report, "Nike's innovation is often solving problems confronting athletes. For example, a 260-pound basketball player jumping 2.5 to 3 feet for a rebound lands at approximately 6 times the force of gravity. With conventional basketball shoes, an athlete is protected only by a small slab of rubber. Now players like Philadelphia 76ers stars Moses Malone and Bobby Jones have an option, our new Air Force One model." But still, the shoe wasn't launched with a great marketing campaign. Only a total of 6 players in the entire NBA wore the shoe. One of them being the aforementioned Moses Malone, back then MVP of the finals and NBA champion. So at least he was a high-profile player. But seriously, that still wasn't enough to make any impact on the basketball world. But still, Nike still sold features instead of a story. They sold the air cushion and not how the buyer could live the dream of one day being an NBA player. That changed in 84 with a bold move by Nike and an undecided Michael Jordan.
Are you ready for your Nike commercial?
Yes.
Most of us have heard about the Jordan brand and how it's making more than $3 billion of revenue per year for Nike today. However, what Michael Jordan did for Nike back in 84 is much more than add revenue. Michael Jordan is one of 2 reasons why Nike is an actual brand that goes beyond the features of the shoe to being a pop culture icon. Nike has made wearing sneakers in public acceptable.
Where do I buy the Nike shoes?
However, hindsight is always 20/20, and in 84, all that Nike could see was the promise of Michael Jordan being a great player. When they offered the biggest contract ever to a basketball star, they took a giant leap of faith, even though today it seems like a no-brainer. Still, just signing Jordan to a massive brand deal wouldn't have been enough. Had Nike continued to treat basketball like a side hustle, all the money would have gone to waste. To better understand what I mean, here are the details of the deal. $500,000 per year over 5 years. Back then, the largest deal was $150,000 per year over 8 years. Jordan's own shoe adjusted to his liking, which was unheard of. Athletes took what they were given. No other player had his own shoe. He also received Nike stock options and some additional miscellaneous stuff like cars. But the deal came with some conditions from Nike. Michael had to either win Rookie of the Year, become an All-Star, or average 20 points per game. Otherwise, Nike could terminate the contract 2 years before the end unless they sold Jordans for at least $4 million in revenue in his 3rd year. But there is one clause that only a few people know about. Jordan's agent asked for an additional $1 million in advertising budget, or his client would refuse the deal.
Congratulations, you're still my agent.
And herein lies the biggest difference to prior Nike product rollouts. Usually, Nike would invest just a little bit into advertising, as I explained before, but this time they actually had to invest in commercials and ads to make the shoes popular. The result? Nike sold inventory worth $126 million of Air Jordans and apparel in the first year alone, far outpacing the expectations of $4 million in the 3rd year. The first 50,000 pairs sold out almost instantly and created an unparalleled longing for a pair of sneakers. The cultural importance of Jordan and the Air Jordans could not have been foreseen. What you can copy though is how Nike for the first time put a greater emphasis on the athlete and the baller lifestyle than on the shoe and its features. Just look at the release commercial of the first Air Jordans.
Man was not meant to fly.
And now compare that to Converse commercial of the same year.
The Converse weapon, that's to shoot, that's magic, do what he was born to do.
It may be so, but that's not all. They let Isaiah play like he's 10 feet tall.
The Converse weapon, the #1 weapon in the NBA.
Oh, sorry, I almost fell asleep there. Putting Michael Jordan into the spotlight of these commercials also helped to use the changes in society to the benefit of both brands. Michael Jordan was such a stark contrast to all previous basketball stars that he represented a whole new generation, a generation that yearned for a more relatable type of star. Michael Jordan's playing style was so extremely different from other players like Larry Bird or Magic Johnson, and his demeanor on court spoke volumes. Jordan would never be like those gentleman ballers who would only occasionally show some fire. Jordan always came with a battery loaded with hellfire, no matter who his opponent was. After Jordan, many other players would act out their emotional side. Before him, only a few would, as it just wasn't fashionable. So apart from Michael Jordan's athletic success, he was the character that Nike needed to establish its image as the ferocious underdog, as the company that would dare to be different.
Because he's the hero Gotham deserves.
When Michael Jordan entered the basketball court for the first time in his Air Jordan 1s, they were banned by the NBA and Commissioner Stern because allegedly they didn't match the team's colors, even though they did. In truth, the shoes were the first basketball shoes that weren't predominantly white, which may have been too unconventional for NBA leadership back then. But sneaky little Nike used even this to their advantage and made a commercial about the ban.
The NBA threw them out of the game. Fortunately, the NBA can't stop you from wearing them.
In essence, they are saying the establishment doesn't like our new style, so this is the style for you if you are an underdog like us. Seemingly overnight, Nike changed their whole image to not conforming to rules anymore. Suddenly, every urban kid wanted to have a pair of Jordans. In fact, the underdog effect is a well-known psychological sales trigger, and if you use it well, can be one of the best ways to make a name for yourself in relatively short time in a market where you already have competitors who may have the lead on you.
Everyone likes an underdog.
I don't.
For Nike, it did wonders in the basketball shoe segment, but also had a positive spillover effect on all other departments. Nike finally became a cool brand amongst the up-and-coming tastemakers like hip-hop and rap artists. The Air Jordans and the Air Force Ones made the leap from being a sports accessory to being a pop culture icon. That in turn generated even more demand and sales, and also guaranteed that every new generation of Jordans would sell out within hours or days. Nike Basketball even got one of the hottest directors and cult figure, Spike Lee, to direct one of their commercials, which in itself became iconic amongst the tastemakers and urban kids.
Why you leave me hanging? Come on, I got it. Oh, Mike, man.
The style was so different from anything Nike has done ever before, but it paid off. The coolness of the brand has never faded ever since, which is also the reason why Nike can sell its shoes for a premium. What Michael Jordan did for Nike was much more than ad revenue. He helped create a whole new definition of the brand. In the end, the one thing that I want you to keep from this video is to always think in terms of marketing stories. It doesn't matter what stage of business life your company is in, it can always be rejuvenated or improved by selling stories instead of features. People like to get behind something they can believe in, and that it's rarely the air cushion of your shoe. Dare to be different, use the underdog story, and also look for trends within society that you can incorporate into the DNA of your company. One last thing, even though the Jordan era propelled Nike into a completely new realm of cool, there's one marketing campaign from the 80s that had a much greater impact on Nike's current market dominance. In a future video, we'll look at the Just Do It campaign, or let's rather say Just Do It story, and how you can come up with your very own magical campaign. You should also check out this video right here. It's a more detailed look into how Pepsi and Coca-Cola used the social conflict of the 80s to their advantage and make billions. See you in the next video, and until then, continue to be awesome. See ya.